stories tall, built here in the early 1930s. Essentially, grains from all over the Midwest would come via the rail lines located directly behind the elevator. A lot of those grains would be stored here and then eventually shipped up that Menominee River, which we just saw, where they would be taken to the Miller Brewery to be turned into beer. Now, connecting those two rail lines is our third style of bridge right here. This is what is known as a lattice truss bridge on our port-hand side. And in fact, this is the state's largest lattice truss bridge, constructed here in 1915. It has a center pivot point, so when this was in use, it would turn on that point to connect those two rail lines. We don't really use this bridge anymore. In fact, it's been shut down since the 1960s. However, at its height, it would have seen about 100 steam engines. It was built here in 1973, but it wasn't actually open to traffic until 1977. So for 3.5 years, this bridge just sat here, unused and unconnected on our port-hand side. And the reason it sat here was because there were a lot of contentions over who was actually going to pay for the construction. Constructed here in 1906, it actually had been the site of a Milwaukee lighthouse dating all the way back to the 1870s. This little red lighthouse served as the main lighthouse for the city all the way until 1926. That's actually a research vessel for the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee School of Freshwater Sciences. And they do a lot of day as well as overnight research trips on the boat here. Now that we've left this cut, take a look from our port-hand side to our starboard side, and you'll be able to see what attracted the first Europeans to this area. And that is that Milwaukee sits in the heart of a giant natural bay. The first Europeans to have come here would have been missionaries and fur traders, a lot of them using these waterways to get further inland.
Would be submerged underneath the water, and all you would see is the blue. Up on the stern of it, you can see the lifeboat, a little bit different than the ones most people are familiar with. These type of lifeboats that are launched down a rail have generally replaced the old David type lifeboat and lifeboats that used to be used.
So we're now re-entering the breakwater wall here on the northern side, and we're going to take a real quick turn into McKinley Marina. And while we head there, I want to point out some of the interesting things you can see off of our starboard side. You can see a beach down there on the horizon. That is Bradford Beach. It's the largest beach here in Milwaukee. That yacht was actually once owned by Nicolas Cage, and then he stopped making good movies. Although arguably he never made any good movies beyond Raising Arizona. So the IRS owned that for a period of time, and it's now owned by the owners of Sandals Resorts. Hence the name Lady Sandals. So let's see if we can get a glimpse of Lady Sandals on board. Small lagoon where you can take out paddle boats for the day. And you can also fish off of these walls. And in fact, you can fish for salmon. They stocked the lakes a couple decades ago, so there's still a lot of salmon here in Lake Michigan. University Club Tower building. Now that building was built here in 1895. And since then, it's actually sunk 12 inches. Now the reason that building is sinking is because where the downtown is built was actually once originally a swampland. So as the permanent settlements grew along the riverbanks here, in order to build more, they had to put down thousands of wooden pilings. So these pilings are large sections of oak and cedar. Giant white building, that is the Milwaukee Art Museum, also sometimes known as the Calatrava. And that's because it was designed by Spanish sculptor, architect, and civic engineer Santiago Calatrava. This was actually his first U.S. project when they constructed it back in 2001. He has since done a number of them here in the United States. But it's done in a style of architecture known as kinetic architecture, meaning pieces of this building actually move. So those those giant wings that are open on the top of the museum right now, that's called the Bruise Soleil. And those open and shut throughout the day. So when they're closed, they're draped over that triangular top part. They typically close at around 5 p.m. Fly a helicopter in a flight simulator. You can also see inside of a nuclear reactor. And they also have a series of touch tanks. These are tanks filled with marine life. They have sharks and stingrays, as well as a lot of fish species that you can interact with. And in that circular part of the museum, that's known as the Aquatarium, they actually house the world's largest model of the Great Lakes system. Now we're pulling back into the straight cut, which we came out of a little bit earlier on the tour. Now just like the artificial land here, this is also man-made. They actually dredged this out on the lakefront back in the late 1850s. Now also during this same period of time, the city itself was growing quite a bit. In fact, between 1840 and 1850, the population of Milwaukee grew tenfold, and about 3,000 boats were traveling through the downtown by 1850. So as you can imagine, there was quite a bit of traffic during this period of time, given that growth. In fact, bridge delays of well over an hour were common during this period of time.